Good evening, everyone. Welcome again to another live streaming of basic transfer pricing. Tonight, our topic will be about secret on how to make a good transfer pricing analysis and documentation. No, this is very helpful, especially to those in charge of making a transfer pricing analysis as compliance to our requirements, no, statutory requirements. And we will discuss also the case of Spain versus Ikea. And here, yung dispute dito or yung transfer pricing issues dito is about the interquartile range and also the median, no, on the ratio used in making a transfer pricing analysis or transfer pricing documentation. Okay? So, let's start with the secret on how to make a good transfer pricing analysis and documentation. But before that, I would like to say thank you po sa ating mga subscribers. Umabot na po tayo ng 743 subscribers. And thank you also to YouTube dahil nag-monetize na po tayo, no? Nung tiningnan ko nung last Saturday, yung ating YouTube channel, nagulat na lang ako may mga ads na, no? So, ibig sabihin, nag-umpisa na po siya mag-monetize itong April. Although, para sa akin, it's not worth pa na magkaroon ng ads kasi nga, kunti pa lang yung viewers at saka kunti pa lang yung subscribers natin at saka para sa akin yung mga video natin dito, parang kung i-standardize ko siya, below standard pa. But thank you, YouTube, na nagkaroon na po siya ng monetization. So, thank you very much. Para sa akin, it's already a big achievement, no? Parang it's worth all the effort na ginawa po natin at na-recognize po tayo. So, thank you very much and we'll continue with our discussion. So, shout out po sa ating, right now, ilan yung viewers natin? 3 or 5, no? 5 viewers. So, shout out po sa ating mga viewers and hopefully, meron tayong matutunan tonight. Okay. So, what are the secrets on how to make a good transfer pricing analysis and documentation? Para sa akin na, ito po yung mga ginagawa ko dito, sarili kong opinion. Although, if we discuss cases, yung dinidiscuss ko doon, opinion of the court. No, hindi naman ako nagbibigay ng sarili kong opinion. But of course, based doon sa decision and saka sa facts of the case, no? The facts and circumstances of the case. So, dito naman sa secrets on how to make a good transfer pricing analysis and documentation, kumbaga sa na pagdugtong-dugtong ko to or the lessons that I learned in making the actual transfer pricing analysis and of course, nirelate ko rin kung paano ginagamit ng court yung transfer pricing analysis and documentation during the resolution of case in court. Once the case is filed in court involving transfer pricing cases, how does the court resolve issues in transfer pricing using the transfer pricing documentation? Kaya nga, ito yung mga sekreto natin, no? So, para sa akin, the number one secret is you have to know the transfer pricing laws and regulations, no? Kasi ito po yung transfer pricing laws and regulations, iba-iba ito. Meron tayong what we call as a domestic na legislation, and if the transfer pricing analysis report na ginagawa natin, may mga parties involved, may mga cross-border transactions. So, we have to know also the tax jurisdictions and the tax authorities of the countries where our client or our company has a transaction, no? So, we have to know also the transfer pricing laws and regulations because different countries also has incorporated in their local legislation their own transfer pricing rules and regulations. So, since dito tayo sa Pilipinas, yung sabi natin, know the transfer pricing laws and regulations, what are the rules and regulations that we have to know in the Philippines, no? So, I'm very happy because Ngayon, meron na tayong what we call as the RAMO 1-2019. So, when you make your transfer pricing analysis report, huwag kayong lumayo doon sa RAMO 1-2019. Ano po yung RAMO 1-2019? This is the transfer pricing audit guidelines. At yung isang natutunan ko doon sa RAMO 1-2019 na to are the elimination or the rejection of comparables. Because when we choose comparables, yung una, wala tayong guide, no, on how to reject these comparables. Acceptable ba lahat ng companies once na pinili natin sila? And paano tayo magpili ng companies or comparables? Mamaya discuss natin yan sa number 2, no? But itong RAMO 1-2019, more or less, meron po siyang guidelines on how to reject comparables. So, yun ang ginagamit ko. And of course, since we're talking about documentation, ano ba yung end purpose why we do transfer pricing documentation? For purposes of audit, no? Transfer pricing audit. And this RAMO 1-2019 is the transfer pricing audit guidelines. So, ano dapat yung ating documentation? Your documentation natin will serve the purpose of this RAMO 1-2019. That's why when we craft our documentation, dapat hindi tayo lalayo dito sa RAMO 1-2019. No? Especially, what are the documentations required or the examiner will require the company under investigation during the transfer pricing audit. No? Nandoon na yung mga documents. What are the examples? Yung supply chain management analysis, yung mga segmented financial statements, yung mga documentation niya on the functions, assets, and risks. No? So, nandoon na lahat. Kasama yan. So, what are the transfer pricing laws and regulations for the international, no, na transfer pricing guidelines? We have this OECD transfer pricing guidelines, and the latest of which is the 2017 OECD transfer pricing guidelines for multinational enterprises and tax administrations. No? So, usually doon talaga tayo kumukuha because yun yung Center for Tax Policies and Administration, sa kanila po yan nagagaling, no? OECD transfer pricing guidelines and the principles accepted for transfer pricing purposes, the arm's length principle, doon po yan sa OECD Convention on Income and Capital, that is Article 9. No? So, yun yung transfer pricing law natin when it comes to cross-border transactions. At ano po yung Article 9 of the OECD Model Transactions? It requires that when there is commercial and financial transactions between related parties, no? And one of the parties, hindi niya ni-report yung income na dapat doon sa isang related entity, pero ni-report ng isang entity dito sa kanya, then the tax jurisdiction of that country may adjust the income of the enterprise and include the income of that enterprise and taxed accordingly. No? Kaya inaalaw yung adjustment sa dyan sa Article 9 of the Model OECD Convention. And ano po yung purpose? To avoid evasion of taxes. No? Kasi ano po ba yung purpose ng transfer pricing? In order that the jurisdiction or the tax jurisdiction where the company is operating will have its fair share in the pie of the international taxes. No? Ibig sabihin, why is it, no, na yung isang company doing business all over the world, nagbabayad siya ng taxes doon lang sa mother country niya, no? Kung nasaan yung head office niya or headquarters. All other countries where it has a significant business presence, doon siya may mga businesses, hindi siya nagbabayad ng taxes, no? So to be fair with that other countries where the country is having business, dapat magbayad din siya doon. That's why ito yung purpose ng transfer pricing, no? To have a tax jurisdiction have its fair share of the international taxes. No? So know the transfer pricing laws and regulations. Kailan nagkaroon ng transfer pricing guideline dito sa Pilipinas? Way back in 2013 with Revenue Regulations 2-2013, no? Dated January 2013. That was the first na nagkaroon tayo ng transfer pricing guidelines. But before that, meron din tayong mga rules and regulations that also involve the investigation of related parties, no? Yung mga conglomerate audits, we have special regulations on that. And meron din tayong RMC or clarification wherein ang sabi doon ni Commissioner Hefty, she was still the commissioner, ang sabi niya, in case of gray area or disputes ng transfer pricing dito sa Pilipinas at wala tayo bang clear na laws, then that would be resolved with reference to the OECD transfer pricing guidelines, no? Okay. Sa transfer pricing naman dito sa Pilipinas, yung latest, after the RAMO 1-2019, which is the transfer pricing audit guidelines, nagkaroon naman tayo ng transfer pricing documentation, no? Requiring Form 1709 to be attached to our income tax return, no? Especially for those company with related party transactions, no? They are required to fill up Form 1709 and attach it to the annual income tax return. So what happened? Kung meron na siyang BIR Form 1709, it's easy for the examiner to have an overview of the related party transactions of the taxpayer. And from there, meron na siyang idea on what documents to further request, no? Mas mapabilis, mapadali po yung transfer pricing audit because of that Form 1709, and the latest of that regulations is Revenue Regulations 34-2020. Okay? So if you are having or crafting transfer pricing analysis involving different countries, different tax jurisdictions, it is also a must that you know the transfer pricing laws, rules, and regulations of each country, no? So, sa documentation requirement natin po sa OECD, meron tayong documentation requirements dyan, the three-tiered documentation requirements, which are the country-by-country reporting, we have the master file, and we have the local file. If you are maintaining all these documentations, hindi na po kayo mahirapan sa pag-fill up ng BIR Form 1709. Pakipatay mo yung masakit sa mata, no? So, dito sa secret number 1 natin is know the transfer pricing laws and regulations. So, we know the rules and regulations in the Philippines. We must know also the rules and regulation of different tax jurisdictions involved in our study, no? So, halimbawa, meron siyang related party in Singapore. So, we must know also the tax rates and the compliance requirements of the tax authority in Singapore. So, example, the company has a related party in Indonesia. So, anong gagawin natin? We have to know also the tax rate, rules and regulations also of Indonesia when it comes to transfer pricing. Kung halimbawa naman meron siyang related party in Thailand, then we have to know also the rules and regulations and the compliance requirements of Thailand, no? So, ganun po ang secret natin. Secret number 1, know the transfer pricing laws and regulations. Why? Because kung ano man yung requirements of the rules and the regulations, that is the end product of our study. So, our study will satisfy the requirements. So, since we have the RAMO 1-2019, which is the transfer pricing audit guidelines, so our transfer pricing analysis report should certainly answer or provide the purposes of this RAMO 1-2019. Kasi, pag hindi, mahirapan tayo. Why? Kasi, para saan ka gumawa ng documentation if it will not answer the requirement of this RAMO 1-2019, no? So, you should align your transfer pricing analysis with the requirements of the RAMO 1-2019. Okay. And then, ano pa yung mga secrets natin? Be prepared with your documentation, no? Ano pa yung mga documentation requirements natin doon sa RR 2-2013? In that guideline of revenue regulations 2-2013, it requires that your documentation should be contemporaneous. And when we say contemporaneous, we mean that the documents should be existing at the time of the transactions. Hindi yung ginawa lang. No? May iba naman, I ask for a contract. Sabi, ma'am, pahingi naman ng sample ng contract. So, ibig sabihin, gagawin pa lang nila. So, hindi yun advisable. Why? Because, ano sabi ng guidelines? So, when you prepare your documentation, it should be contemporaneous, meaning it is existing at the time of the transaction. Halimbawa, contract. Alam nga naman, natapos ninyo ng kontrata, nagkaroon na kayo ng agreement, and then wala pala kayong kontrata, no? And remember, we're talking about documentation. So, I further direct you to the case of Coca-Cola, no? Yung Coca-Cola US yan. Anong nangyari sa case ng Coca-Cola sa IRS, no? Yung mga contracts niya were disallowed and hindi siya binigyan ng weight ng court. Bakit? Because the contract is defective. Hindi siya enforceable. May mga contract sila na ginawa na walang consideration, walang bayad. So, paano yun? No? Yung contract, you impose an obligation to the other party and also an obligation to the other party. Both of them have an obligation. May obligation yung isa. Diba? Halimbawa, you are the seller. Ano yung obligation mo? To deliver the goods. Ano naman ang obligation ng buyer? To pay for the goods. Wala kayong pinag-usapan na ganyan. And of course, how much is the payment for that goods? Wala kayong pinag-usapan ng ganyan. So, as if there is no agreement. Because even if there is an agreement, kung wala siyang object, wala siyang price, then it cannot be enforced. As if walang kontrata na nangyayari. No? So, be prepared with your documentation, and Revenue Regulations 2-2013 requires that your documentation sa transfer pricing analysis report nyo should be contemporaneous or existing at the time of the transactions. No? So, ano po yung requirement sa documentation? It should be sufficient and verifiable. No? So, anong ibig sabihin pag sinasabi natin na sufficient? No, it is enough. You cannot ask for more. Kompleto na siya. No? So, sufficient, hindi kulang. And then, it should be sufficient and verifiable. So, how are you going to verify for the authenticity of that documents? No? When can we say that the documents are verifiable? Siyempre, verifiable yan if your documents can be traced or can be compared, can be reconciled to another document. No? So, if you are a corporation, saan nag-uumpisa ang corporation? Sa SEC or sa the Securities and Exchange Commission. So, what happened? All the reports that the SEC required and then you submit, dapat it complies with the requirements of the SEC. No? Hindi pwede na sa SEC pa lang may violations na kayo. So, your transfer pricing analysis and documentation will not serve that purpose. No? Kasi, kung defective na kaagad sa umpisa pa lang, then magka-crop up yan. Maraming mga transfer pricing issues. No? So, be prepared with your documentation. Sabi na nga natin, verifiable and sufficient. So, saan pa bine-verify po yung documents? Aside from the SEC. Pag mga contracts yan, saan siya bine-verify? Sa archive, no? Tsaka, bakit? Kasi lahat ng mga documents na na-notarize, doon talaga siya pinapadala, no? So, kung hindi yan available doon sa archive, then maybe fake yung mga pinuntahan mo na mga lawyers to notarize your documents. No? So, be prepared with your documentation. And remember that your documentation should be sufficient and verifiable. No? So, next secret, focus on the comparability analysis. Okay. So, yun yung number 3 secret ko. Number one, know the transfer pricing laws and regulations, not only in the Philippines, but also on those countries involved yung study nyo. And then, ano pa, you abide to the RAMO 1-2019 when you make your transfer pricing analysis and documentation. Number two is be prepared with your documentation. So, paano kayo mag-prepare? Halimbawa, yung source document nyo is your stockholders meeting. Then, meron kayong ready na minutes of the meeting. So, sinong gumagawa niyan? Yung secretary ng corporation. Okay. Yung secret number 3 natin is focus on the comparability analysis. No? Okay. So, paano tayo mag-focus on the comparability analysis and what are the 5 factors in comparability analysis? Na yung sinasabi ko, every time nagtuturo ako about transfer pricing, you memorize this. No? Why? Kasi dyan umiikot ang transfer pricing. No? So, what are the comparability factors? No? The 5 comparability factors. Nasabi natin, dun tayo focus, no? So, what are the 5 comparability factors? Number 1 is the characteristics, no? Characteristics of the goods or services, or the characteristic of the goods or property or yung assets, no, ng company, no? So, characteristic of goods and services, whether tangible or intangible. Okay. So, ito yung very important that during the study, i-disclose mo what are the characteristics of the services, goods and services of the company. No? Kasi yun yung pinaka-brand ng company, yung goods and services na pinoproduce niya. Okay. So, number 3 natin na secret is to focus on the comparability factors. At sabi natin, what are the comparability factors? We have number 1, the characteristic of goods and services, whether tangible or intangible. No? And then number 2 is the very important, the functions, assets, and analysis. And functions, assets, and risk, no? Or the FAR analysis. No? So, how are you going to focus or document your FAR analysis? Because we're talking about transfer pricing analysis and documentation report. No? So, how are you going to concentrate on this FAR analysis, the functions, assets, and risks, when you make an analysis of the company? No? So, functions. So, what is the function of the company? Try to look at the purpose when it was registered. No? So, una-unang tingnan mo dyan sa functions. Ano ba yung functions ng company? So, try to look at, ito yung registered functions niya, hindi yan gawa-gawa. So, try to look at the articles of incorporation and the registration niya sa SEC. No? So, for the articles of incorporation, ano yung makikita natin doon? Yung primary purpose niya. Yung primary purpose niya, yan dapat ang kanyang main na functions, no? But meron tayong tinatawag na substance over form. So sa functions, assets and risk, titingnan natin kung ano yung functions. Halimbawa, ito yung mga misleading na functions, no? Because functions will represent the company. So, halimbawa na lang, registered yung company sa SEC, no? The nature is a holding company, no? Pagdating naman doon sa actual, yung functions na ginagawa niya, manufacturing, no? So, which is which? Ano ba yung masunod? The registration niya nandoon sa SEC as a holding company o yung actual na ginagawa niya, no? Kasi yung actual manufacturing company, pero yung nandoon sa SEC niya, yung primary objectives niya is iba yung activity niya, no? Manufacturing company. Okay. So, for the functions, ano yung dapat tandaan natin dito? Because when the function changes, lahat yan damay-damay. Pag umiba yung function ng company, sasagasaan niya yung assets and risk. Mag-iiba na rin yan. No? So, ano po yung sample natin sa functions? Functions can be categorized into number one, manufacturing. Yun pinaka malaki at maraming taxpayer, no? So, manufacturing. Anong functions ng manufacturing? Manufacture ng mga goods and services, no? Why is it that very important ang functions? Because when, halimbawa, during the year, na business restructure yung company, yung functions ng manufacturing, ginawa na lang siya distributor or ginawa na lang siya yung taga-retail ng goods. So, anong mangyayari dyan? There is a major restructuring that changes the functions. And when the function changes, pag gumawa ka ng transfer pricing analysis report mo, yung mga comparable companies mo na ginawa mo doon, dapat same function din siya dito sa ginawa mong functions as stated in your income tax, no? So, sa FAR analysis, FAR is functions, and then we have the assets and we have the risk, no? So, paano natin i-compare yung assets, no? Paano natin explain or paano natin malaman? We have to disclose what are the assets na ginagamit ng company. No? Kasi sometimes yung assets, nandoon yung investment niya, nandoon yung pera niya. No? So, the functions, assets, and then now the risk. No? So, ano yung mga risk na sino-shoulder ng company? And the risk is very important determinant of the actual functions ng ginagawa ng company. Kaya kung ano talaga yung line of services niya or line of business niya, no? Nasa functions yan. So, for the assets, makikita mo din dito yung investment ng company, saan ba napupunta, no? Because when you buy assets, gastos lang talaga yan, no? So, assets, halimbawa, sobrang laki ng assets ng isa, nag-compare ka, maliit lang ng assets siya, magkano ka ngayon ng adjustment, no? So, paano mangyayari yung adjustment? Ipantay mo sila para hindi yung isa sobra-sobra ang kita, yung isa wala namang kita, no? Okay, joke time, no? Gusto ko kasi sa susunod may mga joke time po tayo sa pag nag-aaral, nag-aaral, no? Ano ba yung joke time natin? Dito sa naririnig ko kasi dati while nasa BIR pa ako yung mga jokes ng mga old contemporaries ng BIR, no? Anong sabi nila? Joke lang to ha, do not quote me. Sa BIR daw may 3 klase ng tao. Meron daw bulag, merong duling, merong ano ba 'yon, no? Yung hubad, no? Yung una, bulag, wala daw kita kasi wala niya nakikita, bulag nga. Yun daw yung isang klase ng tao sa BIR. Yung isa naman, duling. Ano ibig sabihin ng duling? Doble kita, no? Doble pag kumita. Yun namang isa, hubad. Ano naman daw yun? Lahat kita, no? So, joke lang po yan, no? Ng mga contemporaries po natin sa BIR. Kasi sa susunod gagawa kasi ako ng mga tax jokes, no? Pero no offense intended naman, mga jokes lang yan. Ano natin na hindi sila below the belt, no? So, ano yung number 3 na secret natin when we make good transfer pricing analysis and documentation? Number 3, focus on the comparability factors, no? So, what are the comparability factors that we are discussing? Number 1 is the characteristic of goods and services, whether tangible or intangible. And then yung number 2, yung nasabi natin na FAR analysis or the functions, assets, and risks. So, why is it na magpo-focus tayo dito when we make a comparability analysis? Because yung FAR analysis na to, there are so many potential transfer pricing issues that will crop up here, no? Especially sa management ng risk natin, no? So, halimbawa, yung risk hindi naman dapat para sa company, binibigay lang, ini-impose lang ng other related parties, no? So di-disclose natin yan in our study. And then we have the economic condition. So ano naman itong economic condition that we are going to discuss in our transfer pricing analysis, no? And report. So the economic condition, especially yung the year 2020 na nagkaroon tayo ng pandemic. So it has an adverse effect on our economic condition. And when you make a transfer pricing analysis, it should be that you discuss the effect of the economic condition or what happened to that company na ginagawan mo ng analysis during the pandemic, no? Kasi yan ang economic condition. So, since it is a public knowledge, na adverse talaga po ang effect niyan sa mga tao. Ilan na yung ating viewers?
7 viewers.
Okay. So, shout out po sa ating 7 viewers, no? So, yung third comparability factors that we are going to focus when we make a transfer pricing analysis report. So, aside from the number 3 economic condition, we also have business strategies, no? So, ano yung mga business strategies na ginagawa ng company, no? Okay. So, for the business strategies, ito yung mga strategies employed by the company para kumita siya, no? Halimbawa, nagkaroon siya ng business strategies ng namimigay siya ng mga promo, nagbaba siya ng price. The purpose is to gain a market share. No, so that can be business strategies. And the reason na naglo-loss yung company is because of its business strategies. So this business strategy should be properly employed. Yung tubig baka ginagamit. Okay, so these business strategies are the strategies employed by the management of the company in order to have beneficial effect on the company, no? So we have to take a look also if the company is employed some business strategies and sometimes it has an adverse effect on its income, no? And number 5 is the contractual terms, no? When you say contractual terms, the company engaged the services of a certain related parties. So, titingnan natin on the contractual terms. Why? Because sa contractual terms pa lang, we have to determine if the provisions or the terms in the contracts are arm's length. Kasi pag hindi yan arm's length, we have to adjust, no? At saka dapat pag gumagawa tayo ng transfer pricing analysis report, kasama yan doon sa ating recommendation or sa ating conclusion, no? Pag gumawa na tayo ng opinion. Okay. So, anong sabi dito? Sa secrets natin, balikan natin. Number 1, know the transfer pricing laws and regulations. Number 2, be prepared with your documentation, kung saan yan galing. Halimbawa, yung documentation mo is coming from your minutes of the board meeting or resolution yan. So, saan mo yan kukunin? Sa books ng corporation, no? And then number 3, focus on the comparability factors. And we have the 5 comparability factors. And what are those 5 comparability factors? We have the characteristic of goods and services. Why very crucial ang characteristics? Kasi pag nag-iba ang characteristic ng goods and services, mag-iiba din yung price niya, no? And then we have the functions, assets, and risk. Bakit natin ito kailangan at dinidisclose talaga siya ng maayos, dino-document pagdating ng transfer pricing analysis report, because changes in the functions will also affect the assets and the risk analysis, no? Kung nag-iba na yung functions mo, mag-iiba na rin yung treatment sa iyo, or apektado na pati yung mga assets and risk mo kasi nag-iba ka na ng functions. And also, halimbawa, from full-fledged manufacturer, nagiging contract manufacturer ka na. So, anong functions ang na affected sa iyo? Hindi ka na fully fledged manufacturer. So, hindi ka na owner ng inventory. So, if you are not the owner of the inventory, na-minimize na yung risk mo, wala ka ng risk na inventory loss. At wala ka ng risk of uncollectible accounts, no? Kasi commissioner ka na lang, no? Hindi ka na owner ng inventory, no? So, pagdating sa assets, ganun din. Ano ba yung magiging risk mo pagka asset intensive ka and you have so much assets? Pag wala kang assets, hindi ka makagawa ng business kasi ginagamit mo yung assets mo sa business, no? Okay. And we have the economic conditions. Because the economic conditions, when we compare kasi, pag gumagawa po kasi tayo ng transfer pricing analysis, we compare, no? We compare independent party transactions and the related party transactions. So, economic conditions is very important because when we compare the factor or the occurrence in the economic conditions, sometimes will make the treatment or pricing ng goods and services. It affects the pricing of goods and services. Just like merong pandemic. So, the demand halimbawa ng food, kung restaurant ka, is nag-lower down. Wala nang bibili, pinapasara kayo ng gobyerno. So, what happened to your restaurant? Wala na. But I talked to my one client kanina, no? Sabi niya, lakas pa rin itong nung restaurant na to. Bakit? It was closed by the local government because of the pandemic. So ano daw ginawa nung restaurant kasi meron na silang mga existing customer, and then naawa naman sa kanilang mga waiter na walang magawa. Ano ginawa nila? Kasi wala na face to face, wala na papasok, sarado restaurant. Yung mga waiter ginawa nilang delivery personnel, no? So kaya nga sabi ko, kung nag-iisip tayo what we are sa existing condition, and then there is a sudden change in condition, mag-isip din tayo on how to relate na continue tayo, no? And then, kasi ang nangyari naman po dito sa lockdown na to, same lang naman ang mundo no? Nandyan lang, may mga conditions lang na iba na binago. Kaya when I try to analyze, sabi ko, ano bang nangyari? Ano bang nabago dito sa pandemic na to? The sun is still shining. The world is still there. Yung mga farm nandyan pa rin. Ano lang yung mga nabago? Yung mga industries lang. O kaya, no? So, dapat baguhin mo rin. So, what this restaurant did, yung mga personnel niya, yung mga waiter niya, hindi siya nag-employ pa ng ibang mga delivery. Yung mga waiter niya, sila yung mga nagdi-deliver, no? Nakamotor, yung iba nakabike. Ang ginagawa ng iba, pagka 5 kilometers lang within the radius, ano lang yan, bike, no? Yung mga nakamotor doon na yan sa malalayo. So what happened? Since malakas naman talaga sila at masarap yung kanilang pagkain, they survived the pandemic. Hindi nawala ng trabaho yung kanilang mga waiter, no? So, yan ang example of the economic conditions, no? Nawala na ba yung business mo because of the economic conditions? No way, no? For those who are really, ano ba yon, yung competitor, ano ba yung tawag doon sa mga competitor na yan na hindi sumusuko kahit na anong mangyari, nag-iisip pa rin, no? Accepting the challenge, no? So yung adverse economic conditions na yan, gumawa sila ng paraan. So that's the example of the yung restaurant na yun. Pero meron naman akong nakita na iba na due to the adverse conditions of the economic conditions, driver, no, I was so down kasi makita ko sila, papalimos na lang. Sabi ko, bakit magpalimos naman, hindi maghanap ng iba, no, na paraan. And then, kanya-kanya kasi tayo yan eh. So, these economic conditions are very important po when we make transfer pricing documentation. So, we have to document. So, how do we document these economic conditions? Siguro yung gagawin natin, para tayong researcher din um, nag-acquire tayo ng mga articles, no? Saying, of course, yung mga sources naman na kapanipaniwala, no? So, coming from the newspaper, coming from the mga website na reliable, no? So, magkakaroon tayo doon ng documentation of the economic conditions. Pero according to the law naman, pag alam na ng lahat na ganun yung nangyayari, hindi mo naman na kailangan na i-document eh. Kasi kagaya halimbawa ng the Philippines is in Asia, kailangan mo pa ba i-document yun? That is a public knowledge, no? Kaya nga itong economic conditions during the pandemic, that is a public knowledge, that is a public, ano yan, kasi alam naman ng lahat, hindi mo pwedeng itago, no? But all you have to do is document it, no? And then we have the business strategies. So these business strategies, how do we document this one? So siguro itong business strategies, because the company, hindi naman yan gagawa ng business strategies without the approval of the board. And alam naman natin na if it is a corporation, then the corporation is the one running the business, then yung business strategies na to should be documented through board resolution, no? And that board resolution during the stockholders meeting recorded in the books of the corporation, no? At saka mayroon siyang secretary certificate. So yun yung documentation natin sa business strategies. And then we have the contractual terms. When we say kasi contractual terms, it should be embodied in the contract. But what if the corporation is not making any contract, no? Parang sa girlfriend-boyfriend, mutual understanding lang. Parang nagkasundo lang sila na boyfriend-girlfriend sila, pero wala talagang pinag-usapan na ito ba talaga yung dapat. So, walang contract, no? So, anong sabi ng transfer pricing? It should be documented. Hindi pwede yung mutual understanding. Because that mutual understanding cannot be enforced in court, no? So what happened to Coca-Cola? There are contracts between the distributor and the seller of their yung raw materials ng Coke na hindi na enforce because wala nga silang kontrata, and then kung meron man, walang object, walang price, walang consideration. So, it cannot be enforced, no? Unenforceable yung mga kontrata na ginawa nila. So, it should be, the contractual terms should be clear, and it should be in the form of a contract, in the form of writing. Why? Because we also have to follow the requirements under our civil law, no? Na ano yung requirements natin doon under the civil law. Magkakaroon tayo ng writing. Why? Because there is a certain threshold as to amount wherein, according to the statute of frauds sa civil law natin, some contracts or agreements should be put in writing to make it enforceable. Otherwise, it is not enforceable. No? So, balikan natin, what are the secrets? Know the transfer pricing laws and regulations. Number 2, be prepared with your documentation. No, kung saan yan nanggagaling. Number 3, focus on the 5 comparability factors. Also, these 5. Tatlong secret lang ibibigay ko sa inyo. Pagka ginawa ninyo ito, hindi kayo na mahihirapan. No? Because the 5 comparability factors, ito yung identified ng OECD. Pag doon kayo nag-focus, well documented and well explained yung 5 comparability factors, maganda na yung inyong transfer pricing analysis. No? Okay. May shout out? Ilan na yung viewers natin?
7 pa rin po.
Okay, sige. Sige, so next na po is our discussion on the case, no? Ano yung case natin? This is about the uh, Spain versus Ikea, no? Ikea. I don't know kung Ikea ito o Ikea, pero Ikea kasi hindi naman to English, no? Swiss ito yung Ikea eh. Ang issue dito is the interquartile range and the median, no, to make it acceptable. Actually, yun din ang pinoproblema ko when I make a transfer pricing analysis, no, because when you try to look at sa range nung kanyang, halimbawa, if you use the gross profit, hindi talaga papasa eh. So, i-justify mo siya by using the interquartile range, no? Kasi pag interquartile yan, may lower, may middle, and then may upper median. So, titingnan mo ngayon kung saan siya papasok. Ito yung case ng Ikea, no? To make their transfer pricing analysis acceptable, no? So, what is this case all about, no? So, Ikea is a manufacturer po ng mga furniture, no? It was founded in Switzerland, and then meron na siyang Ikea group na nagbebenta din ng mga furniture located in different countries in Europe, no? So, itong Spain versus Ikea, this is a case, no, filed in court on appeal. Nag-appeal na sila dito, no? So, ano yung factual background niya? On June 26, 2015, a contentious administrative appeal was filed against the resolution of the Central Economic Administrative Tribunal, no? Ito yung TEAC, or ito yung Central Administrative Economic Tribunal ng government ng Spain, no? So, Spain yan. Yung appeal na yan, no? So first, nag-file sila ng appeal. Second, after several formalities, the claim was formalized on December 2, 2015, no? The state advocate filed a response on March 16, 2016. And then yung third niya is writing of conclusions were presented on June 1 and 9, 2016. So ito na yung decision. Since the documentary was written in English, the chamber requested the applicant to provide a corresponding translation and was transferred to the state bar, no? Proceeding to signal to vote and ruling on February 21, 2019. So, ang tagal din, no? Kasi 2016, 2019, ang decision, 3 years, no? And then, since English, pinatranslate nila sa Spanish, no? I remember na, nung college ako, we were required 12 units ng Spanish, no? Bakit? Pero tinanggal na yun ngayon. Bakit? Kasi once upon a time, we are under the Spaniards. Kaya ni-require sa atin na magkaroon ng units sa college ng Spanish na but it helps also kasi nakakaintindi ka ng Spanish, no? Yung mga vocabulary, dictionary mo, marunong ka ng Spanish. And for your information, the most beautiful language in the world is Spanish, no? And the most difficult language in the world is Japanese. Kasi walang mga tenses, walang mga samantalang ang Spanish, pati adjective niya may gender. Ano yung ibig sabihin ng adjective may gender? Kahit na yung word na pang description lang, may pang babae, may pang lalaki. 'Di ba? Kasi pag sinabi mong gwapo, ibig sabihin yan, ano ba yun? Yung handsome na lalaki. Pag sinabi mo namang gwapa, beautiful girl. So, ibig sabihin, yung kanilang adjective pa lang, may pambabae na, may panlalaki, may gender, no? So, parang madali siyang intindihin. Unlike nung iba na, pag sinabi mo na beautiful, good, pwede na sa babae, pwede sa lalaki. No? Okay. So, ganyan po yung Spain. So, dito, yung Spaniards, yung Spanish word, pinatranslate nila yung decision into Spanish, no? Okay. So, ito na yung parang information about a case, no? So, ano yung mga inappeal nila dito sa resolution, dito sa Ikea versus Spain? The resolution of the Central Economic Tribunal was appealed, no? And was partially upheld. So, upheld, talagang panalo. The appeal filed against the IS Settlement Agreement. Ano tong mga year involved sa agreement nila? 2007, 2008, and 2009. No, imagine, na-decision na siya 2019. 10 taon din, no? Ang tagal. Canceling the regularization carried out in relation to the years 2008 and 2009 and confirming the regularization corresponding to the 2007 financial year. Ito yung mga year under dispute, no, or under transfer pricing audit. So 2007, 2008, and 2009. The regularization corresponding to the year 2007 object of debate was due to the concept of transfer prices. No? So ano yung transfer prices dito? And in relation to the activity of wholesaler of sales carried out by Ikea Distribution Services Spain or IDS. No? So this entity is one of the companies that make up the Ikea group. During the year in question, its main activity was the import. No, nag-i-import siya. Bakit? Kasi yung parent company niya nasa Switzerland. Import and wholesale of furniture and accessories for the home wholesaler. Actually, ang founder nitong IKEA na nag-umpisa is only 17-year-old, no? Na inumpisahan niya yung IKEA. Kasi dito, state of the art yung furniture dito, ready to assemble to na mga furnitures, no? So siya yung nag-umpisa at the age of 17. After that, lumaki yung kanyang companies. Okay. The inspection understood that for the purposes of the provision of Article 16 of the LIS, proceeded to value the acquisition of goods for wholesale resale for a price such that the net sales margin of the entity is 4.1%, no, of the act of this agreement. Kasi itong 4.1%, ito na yung average ng comparables. No? So, consequently, the adjustment described page 8 and 9 of the act, which supposed an increase in taxable was of 37,158,111.52. Yan po yung effect ng adjustment. Second of the analysis of comparability. Why? Kasi nagkaroon na dito ng comparability analysis, no? That's why ang pinag-usapan dito is the interquartile range, because pagka nagawa ka na ng analysis mo and then you are the transfer pricing analyst, ang kasunod yan, mag-perform ka na, gagawa ka na ng opinion mo. No? And then you recommend. So what comes to sustain the appellant in page 3 and of its demand is that market range of the return on sales for a company whose activity is the wholesale purchase is reportedly in the period 2003 to 2005 between 2.1% and 7.6%. Ito yung multi-year data, no? Hindi lang isang taon lang to. To obtain these percentages, the so-called multi-year approach has been applied. Well, he argues that the multi-year approach should be applied in relation to the operations of IDS, and this being 2.2%, no adjustment should be made. So, saan sila nagtatalo dito? Sa ratio, no? Sabi nung company dito, nung IKEA, dapat daw sa 2.2% niya na gross profit, dapat no adjustment should be made. Ibig sabihin, you have to take the 2.2% as the correct, no, percentage sa comparability. Okay. So to understand the scope of the debate, should expose the operations of the inspection which will understand and clarify the argument of the appellant. No? Kaya maganda talaga na pag nag-aaral po kayo ng case, talagang full case, no? Minsan 180 pages yan. Meron nga yung isa na 250 pages. You have to read all those things. Bakit? Kasi doon ninyo ma-appreciate kung bakit nagkaroon ng mga ganyang decision. No? So the inspection explained in details its way of proceeding in page 3 and S of the report of this agreement. He reasons that we are dealing with a transfer pricing scenario and explain in detail how IDs acquired assets from entities of the Ikea group and subsequently provided products to Ikea Iberica, SA, Ikea Norte, and other retail entities of the group in Portugal and Spain. No? So, nandoon yung kanyang mga entities sa Portugal at saka sa Spain. As well, accept the sales figure because it is based on the comparable unit price. So, ayaw nilang mag-adjust, no? So, anong ginawa nila? Nagawa sila ng justification. And these are the justification ng IKEA. Ano daw dapat gawin ng itong kalaban nila dito, the government, no? Ano daw yung dapat? Accept the sales figure because it is based on the comparable unit price. No? So, I accept daw yung sales figure. Applies the method of net margin 4.1% on sales to value the wholesale activity used in the entity's wholesaler study. So, anong ginawa niya dito? Applies the method of net margin. So, ang sabi niya, accept daw yung 4.1% na net margin. The resulting adjustment is made on the price of acquisition of the products. No? So, we are interested in highlighting what is described in page 45 of the settlement agreement. From the same, it is inferred. No? Okay. So, the study of the international transfer pricing documentation of the group for wholesale activities. Ano yung international transfer pricing documentation of the group? Yan yung transfer pricing analysis report. No? The resulting adjustment is made on the prices of acquisition of the products. No? So we are interested in highlighting what is described on page 45 of the settlement agreement. From the same, it is inferred that the study of the international transfer pricing documentation of the group for wholesale activities includes a sample of comparable wholesale companies for which a net margin on sales of 4.1% is obtained, which is that applied by the inspection. Specifically, the report refers to the following margin in IKEA Spain. Ito yung return on sales. When we say return on sales, paano natin to i-compute, no? This is net income over total sales. Kaya nga, return on sales. No? So, return on sale is the operating result on sales. Return on sales, 2006, 3.84%. September to October 2006, no? 3.5%. 3.57%, no? 2007, 0.42%. Kagaya niya na, multiple year data yan. So, bakit siya biglang ganyan nakaliit? Siguro pwede natin itong i-justify. Halimbawa, kagaya na meron na yung pandemic, no? So, usually talagang bababa yan. And the return on sales on 2008 is 2.42%. All of them being the interannual average of 2.22%. So, pag meron ka ng data ng ilang taon, i-average mo na naman yan so that meron kang interannual average. No? So, yun yung basis ng percentage mo. No? So, the interquartile range is between 2.1% and 7.6%. And the median at 4.5%. Imagine, no? Ang lalayo, pero since interquartile, anong pwedeng gawin, no? And the median of 4.1%. What is described allows us to understand the first of the claims. As we can see, the interquartile range is at 2.1% and 7.6%. Therefore, if the return on sales of IDS were within said margins, it should be understood that it is within the market parameter. So, ito na yung contention nila. So, ibig sabihin, daw kung within the range ka, ang range is 2.1% to 7.6%, ibig sabihin nila, pasok ka na. So, arm's length na yung price mo. No? Okay. So as we can see, the interquartile range is at 2.1% and 7.6%. Therefore, if the return on sales of IDS were within said margin, it should be understood that it is within the market parameters. No? So yun ang justification nila. For the inspection, this is not the case in 2007 since the return on sale is 0.42%. Napakababa. Below 2.1%. So what the appellant intend is that we are not to the ROs of IDs in 2007, but to the ROs resulting from the interannual average of the 2006, 2007, and 2008 fiscal years, that is to 2.2% higher than 2.1%. No? The liquidation agreement on page 48 reasoning that the multi-annual consideration referred to in the guide is related to the comparability study. Kasi nagko-compare tayo kaya nga may interquartile range tayo, we compare the, in this case, ang ginamit dito ng transfer pricing analyst is the transactional net margin method. So, anong kinumpare niya dito is the net margin or the net income. No? So, the multi-annual consideration referred to in the guide is related to comparability study as has been done in the PwC report, in which the median considered is the one that has been taken into account the 3 years that the study refers to, but once that is determined, its comparability can be determined individually with its one. Shout out, Hari.
Meron ng
Sige.
shoutout po kay Miss J. Good evening po.
Okay, so good evening po.
Siya lang po.
And ilan yung viewers natin?
7 pa rin.
Okay, so good evening pa rin po sa ating 7 viewers, no? Of the result declared in each year subject to regularization. In the same sense, the TAAC, yung court, no, is pronounced on page 36 and 37 nitong case, no? So the chamber believes that it must confirm the administration's criteria. No? So ano ba yung administration's criteria? So in effect, from the reading of the PwC report, ito yung transfer pricing documentation prepared by PricewaterhouseCoopers, no? Iyan yung big firm. It is inferred that the net margin method of operations, TNMM, was chosen. No? So TNMM yung method chosen. Okay. As indicated in the report, in order to apply the TNMM, it is necessary to select a profit level indicator that measures the relationship between benefits and costs supported, income obtained, or assets used. It is added that the PLI should be obtained from the data of several years in order to obtain a mitigation of the profitability of the uncontrolled companies. No? So Directive 3.44 of the OECD, the PLI by which it was opted was the one of financial ratios, like the profitability of the rent. No? Profit of exploitation divided between sales. No? So net income over sales. The result is described in the table on page 39 of the report. Now, as indicated, the settlement agreement guidelines 3.68 states that in principle, it can be expected that the most accurate information that can be used in a comparability analysis is that relating to the conditions of comparable unattached transactions carried out contemporaneously with the related transactions. So unrelated transactions, contemporaries, since it reflects the behavior of the independent parties in an economic environment and identical to that in which the related operation of the taxpayer was developed. However, the practice shows a certain limitation in the availability of information on contemporary unconnected operations depending on the date on which it is collected, no? So, ito yung nangyayari about the collection, no, ng business. Kasi nga, related group sila. So, saan sila nagpo-purchase ng mga furnitures nila? From the related party. So, in practice, the examination of data for several years is often useful for the comparability analysis, although it is not a systematic requirement. Hindi naman daw systematic requirement, pero ang data for several years is useful for the comparability analysis. So, ibig sabihin dito, they are using multiple year data. So this data referring to several years shall be used when they add value to the analysis of the transfer prices. So if you think na kailangan mo ng multiple year data because it can add value or explanations to your work, then sa kanila ina-allow. But ang nangyayari kasi dito sa Pilipinas, when we make a transfer pricing analysis and transfer pricing audit, it is only on a year basis, no? So, kung ano yung current year, yun din yung gagamitin natin na data. Actual, kasi ang transfer pricing cases is factual, no? The facts and circumstances of the case. So, in order to fully understand the facts and circumstances of surrounding a related transaction, it may be useful to examine the data referring to both the year under review and the previous year. The analysis of this information could reveal facts that may have influenced, no? Kung ano yung facts that influence or that should have influenced the determination of the transfer price. For example, the use of data from previous years will show if the loss in an operation declared by taxpayer is part of a series of losses produced in similar operations. If it is the result of particular economic circumstances of previous year that implied increases in cost in the following year, or if it constitutes the reflection of the fact that a given product is at the end of its life cycle. Kasi ang product po kasi may life cycle, di ba? Halimbawa na lang, gagawa ka ng isang design ng furniture ngayon. Okay, that is sellable for a certain period. After that, wala na. Kasi halimbawa, na-saturate mo na yung mga customers mo, meron na sila lahat. Gahanap na naman sila ng bagong design. So, definitely, the life cycle of that certain model ng product mo, especially furniture, bumababa na, no? So this type of analysis can be particularly useful when going to a method based on the result of the operation, no? So ano bang method based on the result of the operation, no? So ano ba yung result ng operation natin? The income statement. So on the usefulness of the multi-year data for the analysis of loss situation. This data referring to several years can also help to improve the understanding of long-term contracts, no? So, ano ba yung long-term contracts? The validity of the contract is not only 1 year, no? Multi-annual data are also useful for having information about the relevant economic cycles and the life cycle of the products of the comparables. Differences in the economic cycle or in the product cycle can have a substantial effect, no, on the transfer pricing conditions that must be assessed to determine their comparability. Data from previous years can show whether an independent company involved in a comparable operation was affected in a comparable way by comparable economic circumstances, or if the different conditions of any year above affected their prices or profits in such a way that they should not be used as a comparable element, no? So multiple year data may also improve the process of selecting comparable third parties. For example, by identifying the result that may indicate significant variation with respect to the underlying comparability characteristics of the link operation being reviewed, which sometimes leads to the rejection of the comparable or to detect anomalies in the information about third parties. Ano yung anomalies in the information of the third parties? If you try to look at the RAMO 1-2019, may sinasabi siya doon about the guidelines, no? Ang sabi niya doon, careful daw yung mga examiner to the use of the comparables. Why? Because there can be comparables na gawa-gawa lang din ng company, no? Halimbawa, gumawa siya ng transactions with an independent party, pero yung independent party na yan, mayroon na silang understanding doon so that this independent party can be used by them as comparable when they make their transfer pricing analysis. So parang kung sa mga product pa prefabricated na, no? Parang in-impose na nila para meron silang positive na comparables, no? Okay. The use of multiple year data does not necessarily imply the use of multiple year averages, but multi-year data and means can be used in some circumstances to improve the reliability of the range, no? Where they deal with statistical tools. No? So, in accordance with the guidelines, the ideal is to be what he calls contemporary unconnected operations, given that it reflects the behavior of independent parties in an economic environment identical to that in which the related operation of the taxpayer was developed. However, in certain cases and for certain reasons, the examination of data for several years is usually useful for the comparability, for the analysis of comparability, although it is not a systematic requirement. So ano daw? Examination of data for several years, hindi naman siya requirement, no? So the number of years to be taken into account must be determined and justified in its case, since it would be appropriate to set standard regarding the number of years that the analysis of more than 1 year should cover. However, note that the inspection and the TAEC maintain the guidelines when establishing the guidelines are referring to the annual consideration of the operation. One thing is that the guidelines consider it reasonable in certain cases to go to the examination of several years to understand the link operation and quite another to use the market average of several years to understand that the entity is within the range of comparability. That is, the multi-annual consideration is related to the study of comparability. But once the study has been carried out, the comparison has been made individually and in relation to the result of its exercise subject to regularization, no? Or should be regulated. So the previous argument should be added as the inspection reasons that the entity calculates the average of its 4 years, but then does not compare it with the average resulting from the sample, but argues that their prices must be valid because the average is within. On the other hand, to proceed as the entity says such average, why the years that the entity has taken, no? And why not? Kaya nga ito yung parang justification natin pag halimbawa masyadong lower yung ratio or profit level indicators ng company na ginagawa natin na analysis, no? In addition, the inspectorate adds that the entity alleges to defend the goodness of taking into average of the 4 years, no? Kasi ito yung ginawa ng transfer pricing analyst ng Ikea. The fact that IDS has to face the market and price risk, incorporating some data in the annexes B, C, and D, analyzing these allegations, it can be observed that they refer to data for the years 2007 and 2008. Nothing says of the years 2006 and earlier, so we do not know the variables that may exist in them. B attempts to reflect what is said in the allegations that purchase price reduction were estimated, but purchase prices increased during 2007 and 2008, without the technical office being able to verify whether the forecast were those or other or the variable that had in previous years. Annex shows graphs of prices of raw materials in which it can be seen that in effect, some raw materials go up in 2007 and 2008, but others remain in the same price increase. Is continuous since many years before. No? So Annex D is a sheet with a table that says that they were sales forecast and actual sales for the years 2007 and 2008 without the technical office being able to make any assessment of what is said there. No? Yun yung nakalagay sa settlement agreement. In short, taking into account the above, adding that as explained by the TAAC, the guidelines have as their object the elaboration of the comparability study. The board understands, especially considering the evidence in this case, that the inspection performance of once the comparable data has been obtained, applying the result obtained to its exercise is correct and it must be confirmed, no? So, ano yun? Sabi dito ng court, the reason is dismissed. Hindi ka panipaniwala yung reason. Okay. Third, about the range to which the adjustment should be made. Kasi nga, nag-present na sila dito ng result. So, anong nangyayari dun sa range? No? So, ito yung sabi. The reason is developed in page 10 as inferred from what has been described. Inspection applied the net margin method. No? Kasi ano yung net margin method niya? 4.1% on sales to value the whole sale activity. Kasi yan yung lumabas na net margin, no? Ng kasama yung mga comparables. The first thing that appellant indicates is that the option for the application, the median of the sample is not reason, but in addition, it is maintained that the adjustment should have been made applying 2.1%. So we remember that it is the lowest interquartile limit. And finally, it is maintained that the inspection in any case should apply the median of the interquartile range and not the median of the sample. So in page 10 of the report of this agreement, the inspection indicates that the sample of companies presents a wide variability and argues that to determine the point of rank of comparable companies, it is necessary to refer to the one set forth in the OECD Transfer Pricing Guide. Explanatory Memorandum of the Law 36, 2006. In application of point 3.62, it is maintained that when some defect persists in the comparability, kasi sometimes di mo maiwasan, there is some defect in the comparability, especially yung coming from your comparables, no? Wala naman talagang perfect na comparable. No? So it could be convenient to use measures of central tendency. Ano yung measure of central tendency? Which is why we look at the median instead of the average, no? So median instead of average. Kasi pag sinabi mong average, itotal mo lang yung number of companies. Kung halimbawa, net profit yan. So itotal mo lang yan and then divided by the number of companies, yun na yung average net profit mo. No? So when we look at the median instead of the average, because the average offers a net margin on sales of 6.1% compared to the 4.1% of the median, no? So, ano ba yung average, ano ba yung median, no? In a sample that seeks to obtain returns from companies, the values of those that for atypical or non-controllable reasons obtain very high results displays the value of the average upwards, so that a measure of central tendency like the median seems more reasonable. No? In the settlement agreement, the same question is analyzed. It is reiterated that point 3.62 is applicable, and the reason why, in the opinion of the inspection, the PwC report offers a significant data that allows determining that no margin offers a price above full jurisdiction applicable to the ITS entity. So, anong pinag-uusapan dito? Yung median na 4.1% na kung acceptable ba o yung net margin on sales na 6.1%. No? Okay. So, ito yung pinag-uusapan dito kung acceptable ba o hindi. And to the effect, it is said that while the volume of operation of IDS ranges between 1,011,615,348.61 in 2007. Actually, itong Ikea, ito yung the biggest na manufacturer at saka distributor ng furniture, no? Okay. In 2007 and 845,168,867 in 2008. So in the case of companies used as comparable, it ranges from 1,134,000 and 40,738,000. It should be noted that practically all the companies considered in the sample, with some specific exceptions, have for the most part a volume of operation that ranges between 2 and 4 million pounds. Based on such reasoning, based on sales volume, the settlement agreement concludes that not any range satisfy the arm's length price. So anong sabi? Not any range satisfy the arm's length price. So it is most appropriate to use central tendency averages. No? So ano yung central tendency averages? Yun yung interquartile range. No? So it is important in the opinion of the Chamber that the liquidation agreement, based on what has been described, understands that 4.1% should be applied both to the 2007 exercise in which the return on sale was 0.42% as in 2008. No? So instead na 0.42% lang noong 2008, dapat 4.1% yung net margin, no? In which the return on sale was 2.42%, no? Since only any range can be admitted when the results are very reliable and relatively equal, a condition that in no case occurs in the present case. So, hindi ganyan daw yung present case, no? As we have seen, therefore, the inspection agreement, in our opinion, in a coherent way, maintains that it should apply the average and not the interquantum limits. No? So, anong sabi dito ng court? Dapat daw average ang in-apply, hindi yung interquartile range. For that reason, it gives the same treatment both in 2007 as 2008. Well, in view of the circumstances described, they do not seem to be reliable ranges. Oh, pero mo yan. Hindi reliable yung range. Ang hirap noon pag ikaw yung gumawa, then the court will say na, hindi reliable itong ginawa mo na ranges. Estimating, it is more correct to resort to the means of central tendency. So that, kasi ako, pag gumagawa ko ng transfer pricing analysis report, as simple as it is, hindi ko na kino-complicate, no? The TEC, however, is separated from the inspection criteria and maintains that the application of the median, negative 4.1% in 2007, is correct, no? Since it is not within the margins between the first and the third quartile. However, the application of the same criteria to the year 2008 is not, since the return on sale is within the interquartile margin, no? So, yun po yung sinasabi dito ng court. Okay. Ilang oras na, Hari?
1 hour 25 minutes.
Okay, so we still have 35 minutes. So, kaya pa naman to. So, reasoning extensively that the use of the volume of operation criterion does not justify the non-use of said margin when the PwC report was accepted. Kasi ayoko kasi yung nagsushortcut sa case, no? Gusto ko, kung gusto nyong pakinggan yung shortcut, yung end na lang, pero along the way, nandoon pa rin yung explanation why the court reaches that kind or give that kind of decision, no? Well, it is not consistent that the sample is used with the comparability analysis as well as to extract data on which the regularization itself is based and then rejected for the effect that could be favorable in the interested party as it is for the application of the Rule 3.6 of the aforementioned guidelines that exclude adjustment when they are within the range. Kasi, di ba po ba doon sa comparability analysis natin, if hindi sila similar, no, we have to adjust. Pero pag ginawa natin siya ng analysis and then yung kanyang net margin is within the range, o ibig sabihin, hindi malayo doon sa mga comparables natin, then acceptable siya. Kasi pag hindi, you have to make an adjustment, magbabayad ulit. No? So, it suffices with the description made to reject that there is a lack of motivation in relation to the application of 4.1%. However, what the applicant maintains is that it is inferred from the PwC report that the ROS, return on sale of the companies compared, is between 2.1% and 7.6%. Therefore, with a return on sale, 2.1% would be within market price, and the adjustment should be made using 2.1% and not 4.1%. So, ito naman yung point of dispute nila. Kasi, ang sabi ng Ikea, ang gamitin yung 2.1%, no? Hindi yung 4.1%. Kasi, pagka binultiply mo yan sa malaking sales, ang laki ng effect niyan, no? Okay. May shout out? Okay. So, note that when performing the 2007 adjustment, the inspection in order to obtain the full competitive operating result performs the following operation. Ito yung ginawa ng court, no? So, 1,011,615,348.61 times 4.1%. So, how much is that? That is 41,476,229.29 pound. And based on said figure, performs the adjustment. No? So, nandyan na, naggawa siya ng adjustment. Amount that would be noticeable lower than applies to 2.1%, no? 21,243,922.32 pounds. The OECD guidelines in point 3.6 provide that if the relevant condition of the related transactions, for example, price or margin, are within the arm's length range, no adjustment will be necessary. Kasi bakit ka adjust, within the range naman siya. Oh? So on the contrary, according to Rule 3.61, if the relevant conditions of the link operation, for example, the price or margin, are outside the arm's length range determined by the tax administration, the taxpayer must be given the opportunity to argue how the conditions of the related operation satisfy the arm's length principle and whether the result falls within the arm's length range, no? That the arm's length range is different from that determined by the tax administration. It is not capable of demonstrating these facts. The tax administration must determine the point within the arm's length range through which to adjust the condition of the related transactions. And finally, Rule 3.62 states, to determine this point when the range comprises very reliable and relatively equal results, it can be argued that any of them satisfies the arm's length principle when some defects in comparability persist, as so in paragraph 3.57, it might be convenient to use measures of central tendency that allows to determine this point, for example, the median, the average, or the weighted average, depending on the specific characteristics of the data in order to minimize the risk of error caused by defects in comparability that persist but are not known or can be quantified, no? So yun po yung sinasabi dito ng court, no? Ano yung reason kung bakit average or weighted average ang gagamitin, no? So, depending on the specific characteristic of the data, in order to minimize the risk of error caused by defects in comparability that persist but are not known or cannot be quantified, no? So, yun yung mahirap kaya dyan na papasok yung role ng statistician, no? Sa transfer pricing study. Okay. So, in the opinion of the chamber on this point, the appellant must be given reason. O, sino ba yung appellant dito? Si Spain versus Ikea. O, sino yung appellant dito? Si Spain. Okay. The appellant must be given reason. Indeed, as we have indicated, the inspection was consistent, gave the same treatment to the 2007 and 2008 financial years since it understood that it should apply the median of 4.1% on the understanding that in accordance with the point 3.62 of the guideline, it was convenient to use measures of central tendencies such as the median, specifically considering that the study has comparability defects given the companies included in the sample have lower sales volume, no? So, page 38 of the resolution. Logically, the circumstances that justify the use of the median were worth as much for 2007 as for 2008, since the reasons were the same. However, the TAC, based on the fact that the inspection assumes the operation of PwC, affirms that the data obtained will never be perfectly reliable, no? Not being consistent. So, dito kasi, ang pinag-uusapan dito, acceptable ba o hindi yung range na ginamit ng PwC. So that the sample be used as an analysis of comparability as well as to extract data in which basis the own regularization to later be rejected for the effect that could be favorable to the interested party, no? As it is for the application of Rule 3.6 of the aforementioned guidelines that exclude adjustment when they are within the range. No? So therefore, the agreement is cancelled at this point because the entity was within the range. No? So remember that the interquartile range was between 2.1% and 7.6%, and in 2008 was at 2.42%. No? That is, for the TAAC, it was not possible to apply the rule of Article 3.62 on which the inspection is based, since in 2008, the company was within the margins required by Article 3.6, which did not happen in 2007. Now, in our opinion, it is clear that if the return on sale is outside the limit of the interquartile range, the corresponding regularization must be made, no? So, hindi siya outside siya the limit ng interquartile range. So, anong gagawin? Since only from 2.1% is the entity within the comparable market margin. However, to apply the median is necessary. In addition, there are defects of comparability, no? So, may defect yung comparability. And if they did not exist for 2008 for the same reason, they did not exist for 2007. Note that in view of the arguments of the inspection that he maintained the existence of defects of comparability, the TAAC states that a difference in sales volume is not a sufficient reason to reject the validity of the report, no? Bawa, nag-iba yung sales volume. No? So the fact that the proven entity occupies a leading position within the sector for in sales volume does not in itself cause a lack of homogeneity. No? So, in short, it seems to us that once it has been determined that the appellant STR in the exercise under discussion is outside the lower interquartile interguarantor 2.1%, it is appropriate to carry out the corresponding regularization. But the fact that this habit does not allow without more apply the median in the term provided in Rule 3.62 because the application of this rule is not justified in the fact of being outside the arm's length range, but in the existence of defects in comparability, which, according to the arguments of the TAAC itself, were not assumable in 2008, and by extension, no, they would not be in relation to 2007. The reason is estimated since the chamber understands with the plaintiff that the adjustment should have been made on 2.1%, not on 4.1%. No. It is not necessary, therefore, to analyze whether the median of the interquartile range should be used instead of the median of the sample. No? So, ayaw i-decide ng court. No? So, sabi niya, it is not necessary daw na i-analyze yung kung ano man yung median. Fourth, on the need for the adjustment to be made on the sales figures and not on purchases. No? Ano yung pinapa-adjust dito ng court? The sales, pero hindi niya pinapa-adjust yung purchases. Okay. So the reason is developed on page 12, and it is argued that the prices paid by Ikea retailer to IDS were significantly lower than what an independent third party would have paid for the same Ikea product. Okay, so masyado daw mababa yung pricing ng price ni Ikea, no? So what in the applicant's opinion would imply that the value of the purchases of Ikea, no, Iberica, should be increased by IDS by 7%, and in parallel, the value of IDS sales to Ikea Iberica, no? So in page 15 and 16, tables are shown according to which, in any case, the adjustment should be made, no? Kasi there are times na yung findings mo talaga kailangan magkaroon ng adjustment. Increasing the value of the sales of IDA to IKEA and symmetrically increasing the value of the purchases of IKEA Iberica. So yun yung recommendation ng court. Now, apart from the argument of the TAC on page 37 of the resolution, the result is that as recognized in the application and inferred from the record of this agreement, the applicant company and the inspection agreed based on the reports provided, no? Except the aforementioned study of PwC as verification of the application of the comparable unit price method mentioned in the transfer pricing documentation, and the transactions with IKEA retailers are carried out under arm's length condition. So, in principle, this matter was not discussed. No? Yun yung sabi ng court. However, the company's argument was analyzed in the settlement agreement in page 49 and 50. It states that the appellant argued based on report provided and attached to the application that the price applied in transaction in the United Kingdom are, after making the necessary adjustments, lower down than those they are applied between two independent groups. This report is the same one which the demand is based, whose result it intends to extrapolate. No? However, this report refers to the purchase price of IKEA products for the United Kingdom, and as we have said, what the appellant intend to extrapolate the results of said report to IDS prices. No? So yun talaga ang bottom line. As the inspection reasons, the study at no time compares such prices with the applied in the transactions between IDES and IKEA Iberica? And does it analyze whether the chosen products are equally representing of the transactions between two entities of such study that the prices applied between IDA and IKEA Iberica or among all the wholesalers and retailers of the IKEA group are lower than those they would be applied between independent companies, no? So the study simply serves the actuary as an element of conviction that the group makes an application of the reasonable unit price method that should not be questioned. Okay. These arguments, in the absence of greater accreditation, must be accepted by the chamber, sharing the argument given by the inspection. So in short, the reason is dismissed and the claim is estimated in part. Fifth, on the cost, no? Dito walang cost na dineclare yung court, no? Okay. On the cost and then the failure and then the publication. So, anong nangyari dito? Yung ibang decision dito ng tax authority, hindi pinanigan ng korte, no? Although there are some na pinanigan naman yung korte in favor of the IKEA. Okay? Ilang hours na tayo, Ari?
1 hour 41 minutes.
Okay. So, wala na eh. So, anong gagawin natin pag naggamit po tayo ng interquartile range? Be sure na the economic activity of our client is properly disclosed, no? At saka properly classified. Kasi sa 5 comparability factors po, na ano tayo dyan, yung we are explaining or talagang dinadala natin dyan kung ano ba yung klase ng client na we are doing the report, no? Okay, so with that, I would like to say thank you. Ilang subscribers na tayo, Hari?
743.
Okay, so with that, I would like to say thank you sa ating mga subscribers. Umabot na po tayo ng 743. And also to the viewers, thank you very much for watching.